Hey everyone, welcome to my Scoundrel video. Another one in less than a week. So these videos I can kick out quite nicely. I hope you're enjoying the longer format. I do tend to ramble a little bit, but I can certainly get into more detail with these characters. So make sure to check it out all the way to the end to know my feelings on basically everything to do with the Scoundrel really. This kind of does cover everything really to do with that character. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to toss it a like and consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content from me, or check out any of my other videos below. You can also catch me live at twitch.tv/mandatoryquest, where I stream every Monday, Wednesday and Sunday, usually Gloomhaven, so come hang out and talk Gloomhaven with me there. But I won't hold up the video any longer for you. Let's talk about the Scoundrel. Okay guys, let's take a look at our level 1 Scoundrel. So the cards we're going to take at level 1 is Flanking Strike, Smoke Bomb, Backstab, Thief Snack, Venom Shiv, Throwing Knives, Quick Hands, Special Mixture and Sinister Opportunity. And I'll put a graphic up right now with all of the board game cards so you can see all of those cards and which ones we're taking. So you can pause the video here if you want to see those from the board game. Now, what we have to talk about really is the cards that we're leaving behind, but also the sideboard potential that the Scoundrel has. So the Scoundrel only has 9 cards, which is very small in this game, especially for someone who is going to be running around doing a lot of damage and has some big burn effects as well potentially that they want to use throughout the course. So we're leaving Single Out here, and Single Out is not a bad card. It just has exactly the same effect as Flanking Strike. However, it doesn't have that move 5 on the bottom that is going to be, you know, so useful for us as well as we're playing. The thing with Single Out is that it's kind of counterintuitive, the bottom of Single Out, because quite often we're trying to make all of our enemies be adjacent to our allies, whereas Single Out, the bottom of this, is actually trying to get you to do the reverse of this. So this has kind of got reverse synergy with this strategy of you trying to get enemies into positions that are adjacent to your allies, right? Because that's how you're going to do most of your damage. So this is just kind of a little bit counterintuitive. I think it's a fine card. Like the top is, you know, is a decent attack, and certainly, you know, I think that this is a card that you could bring in with this build, or you could bring in with any build. I don't think it's a bad card by any means. However, I just feel like it slightly loses out at level 1 to some of our other cards that we have, and also I think that the burn on the bottom of this is a little bit of a trap for maybe a new player to fall into. Now again, if you are playing with different numbers of mercenaries, this might actually be in your favor, because if you're playing with only 2 mercenaries, you may actually find that the bottom of Single Out is very useful for you, because you find it more difficult to do your positioning with only 2 mercenaries. However, you're playing with 3 and 4, generally speaking, I think that you probably want to leave this out. The next card as well is Trickster's Reversal, which is another great sideboard card potentially that you may want to bring in. Being able to deal damage to a high shield value is just insane. This can be extremely good. However, it is a burn. It does give you 2 XP, which is very nice. The bottom of this card is very kind of like negligible really. I don't think you'll find you know, much use for this. It'll have some corner case potentially, but nothing crazy. But the top of this is very good to bring in against shielded enemies, and you could potentially take out something like Throwing Knives if you were having trouble, because a low value attack like Throwing Knives is unlikely to get through a shield. So potentially you could remove this for this if you wanted to, if you were really struggling. However, again, this is just not something that you want to bring on every single scenario. I think you just need to have a look at what enemies you're facing and make the decision ahead of time. The Scoundrel is a very flexible character, and actually I don't think that there are a few little pitfalls to maybe fall into with this character, but I do think this character is quite forgiving. I think it has quite a high floor in terms of how to play the character, but it also has quite a high ceiling. So although you can't really play this character terribly, you can certainly play this character very efficiently, and you can get a lot more value out of it if you get used to playing this character well, for sure. Swift Bow is another card that could come in here if you are finding yourself struggling because you can't get into melee range very easily for whatever reason. Maybe there's a lot of obstacles, maybe there's a lot of terrain, or there's certain enemies that are very difficult to deal with. It's also very good against retaliate enemies, so if you're facing a lot of things with retaliate, you could consider bringing in some extra range. The bottom of this is a bit of a trap. It looks like it's very strong. You suddenly think, hang on, you know, potentially I could get an extra pile of loot here. Because if you think that where you stop and you rest, that's where you're going to loot, right? So if I was to move 2 hexes and I was to move onto a hex that had loot on, if I was to end my turn there, I would loot that hex anyway. So realistically, as the card stands, it's maybe getting you 1 extra pile of loot. And that's about it. Now, you can obviously combo this with other move abilities. You can also potentially use it with boots. So you could enhance this to be a +1. You could use boots to increase the actual movement amount. But the Scoundrel isn't one of the starting characters that really needs boots. I mean, the kind of boots that you want on the Scoundrel, to be honest, winged shoes. She wants jump. She has some very, very good movement abilities right from the get-go. Got to move 5, a move 6, another move 5. I mean, she can absolutely fly around the level at level 1 compared to a lot of the other characters. So really, jump is going to be more important for you to be able to get in behind enemies, go over traps, go over obstacles to be able to do your attacks and make sure that you can get actually into melee range of your enemies. So I don't think that you want boots of striding with this character, so even with that, I would say that this is kind of a bit corner case. And to be honest, I think I would only consider bringing this in if you were really struggling with certain scenario types, again with retaliate and things like that, certain ranged enemies. So the way that this build also kind of works is more of a kind of attack focus build. This is going to be about positioning your enemies around you, making sure that we can always take advantage of our flanking strike bonuses, making sure that we can poison and do a lot of damage to the different enemies. And yeah, essentially we will be trying to do as much damage as possible, and we're going to be using Sinister Opportunity here to mainly ensure that we get our flanking strike bonus, but also to force enemies into traps and things like that. That can be extremely strong. Same with Smoke Bomb. We're using Smoke Bomb to be able to pull enemies into range for flanking strike and things like that, but also so that we can pull enemies through traps and position them in ways that are going to be beneficial to us. Eventually, we're going to be setting up Smoke Bomb top, and we're going to be going invisible, and we're going to be doing a big attack, probably with something like Backstab, or maybe with Sinister Opportunity with the top of Sinister Opportunity instead. Now, we don't really have much opportunity to actually use the top of Sinister Opportunity in this build, because we only have one way to make Night, which is by burning our Smoke Bomb, and actually there aren't any starting characters who make Night at level 1. Now, you will get access to Night through some of the unlockable characters, and so your mileage with Sinister Opportunity will vary depending on your class makeup. This is definitely a character where you can certainly make decisions on some of the sideboard cards and some of the level 1 cards, depending on your party makeup for sure. So you could, for example, if you had a lot of heal and you had poison already, you maybe could consider getting rid of Special Mixture, for example, and actually bringing in Single Out instead, or bringing in Swift Bow instead. But for now, I think that this is a very beginner friendly level 1, and I think this gives us like a lot of opportunity to be able to mess around at level 1. Okay, let's take a look at what we take at level 2. So at level 2, we get the card Open Wound. Open Wound is a very nice card because of the wound effect that we get here, the extra 1 XP from adjacent, and the move 5 is very nice. So again, this is a nice card that plays into the strategy that we're trying to go for here, which is to try and get enemies adjacent to us and then get our added effects. 11 initiative is another early initiative for us as well, which is good. And the other card we have is Flintlock, which is a very late initiative. Now, Flintlock is interesting because this loot 1 is on the top of a card. My main criticism of loot as like an effect in the game is that quite often, while you usually find it on the bottom of a card, it's a burn. So you have to kind of position yourself before you play the card, so you almost have to take like almost a whole round off to do your looting, right? You need to move yourself into a position, then on the next round you have to play your loot card. Now this allows you to move and loot in the same turn, which means that you can be very, very efficient at looting. So if you want to get rich, this is a very good way to do it. The bottom is just an attack 5 range 4 for burn 2, which I think is, yeah, that's a very strong attack. 2 XP as well, that's not a bad effect. So for this build though, we definitely want Open Wound because we're going to go for the damage build. However, if you wanted to get rich, then Flintlock is not a bad way of doing it. I do think that generally speaking, if you play in an efficient manner, you can actually usually pick up most of the loot in a level not using loot cards. Loot cards certainly make it easier and will allow you to play faster. However, quite often with good positioning and with the right kind of party makeup, you can actually loot pretty efficiently and maybe only leave 1 or 2 piles of gold, maybe, you know, at the end of the scenario in the dungeon without taking it, right? So I always find that loot 1 is kind of like a bit strange, because I feel like you can probably actually orchestrate a way for you to be able to pick up most of that loot with loot 1. Loot 2 is slightly better. If this was loot 2, then I think that may factor more into this, but we're definitely going for damage, so we're taking open wound here. So we're bringing open wound in, and the card we're going to be swapping out is actually Venom Shiv here, because Venom Shiv, essentially we're not losing any of the movement here. We still got to move 5. We got that. The poison effect is nice, but actually we can kind of apply that ourselves here with this. You may want to keep Venom Shiv in if you are working towards the poison achievement though, so if that is something you're trying to do, you may want to actually keep Venom Shiv just for that purpose. And you could swap out something else. You could potentially swap out Backstab if you wanted to, or Flanking Strike. I mean, Backstab's just great movement though, so you always got to bear that in mind. But in this build here, we are kind of going from the purposes of just being the best Scoundrel that we can possibly be, and in that case I think we want to get rid of Venom Shiv and we want to bring Open Wound in instead. Now that we've got this, we are still keeping that 1 XP that we would be getting from Venom Shiv. We're keeping the same movement, and we got a nice early initiative again on this character. Okay, let's take a look at level 3. Alright, so level 3 is Hidden Daggers and Duelist Advance are the 2 cards that we have. Now, let's talk about Hidden Daggers first. So Hidden Daggers, attack 4, range 3, target 2, 2. It's not a terrible effect. However, we do also have Throwing Knives already, which is a very strong card, allowing us to, you know, do attack 2, range 3, target 2, 1 XP. This is basically 2 extra damage for an extra XP, and it's a burn. So it feels very strange to me that we would want to have 2 cards doing essentially the same thing. This does a little bit more damage, you know, but is that worth a burn? 2 extra damage? I'm not sure it is, because we could always play Throwing Knives twice, right? Also, this has got the loot 2 on the bottom, which loot is very good early game. You want to try and get your bank balance going, so you want to try and get some items for your team. You want to get some enhancements for your team. So I think that you don't necessarily actually want to get rid of the loot 2 straight away, especially with the Scoundrel. So Hidden Daggers, the top, kind of a little bit underwhelming. Not a bad effect, but certainly it feels like the burn is a bit harsh. The Invisible on the bottom is very good though. Invisibility is very strong, very good on the Scoundrel, because you're going to often find yourselves in positions when you go early and you're going to be the focus of attacks potentially. Scoundrel is a character where you want to be trying to go early one turn, you know, you want to go late one turn, then you want to go early, then you want to go early again to run away, then you're going to want to go late, right? You're trying to work your initiative in a way in which that you can essentially take back-to-back turns every now and again, because that's going to be hugely beneficial for you. And Hidden Daggers, the invisibility will allow you to ensure that you can do that, as well as having that late initiative there is another way to be able to sort of set up those back-to-back turns. However, I think just invisibility on its own is not necessarily worth taking this, because again, if you're playing like on 2-player, for example, you're then leaving your teammate just, you know, at the whims of all of your enemies and things like that. So although invisibility is very strong, I don't think that can save this card, unfortunately. Now, Duelist Advance is really excellent. It kind of supports the reason why we have Quick Hands as well, you know, because we have the move 3, attack 3, whereas on Quick Hands is a move 2, attack 2. So this is just a strict upgrade to Quick Hands, really. Not only that, but the bottom of this card is actually incredibly strong as well. So this is giving you that extra effect, kind of what you would get from a single out, right? Except it's not a burn. It's only for 1 turn, but it's not a burn. So being able to do this and actually use Throwing Knives, suddenly this plus Throwing Knives is actually equaling Hidden Daggers here, right? So suddenly we've played the bottom of this to give ourselves +2 attack on all of our attacks. And now we're going to use Throwing Knives. So now we're attacking for 4, right? If obviously the enemies are on their own and adjacent to none of their allies. But this is the way you need to start like thinking about, like, actually, you know, this is obviously a very simple effect. This is more complicated, but it allows you to save yourself from burning a card. And when we've only got 9 cards, this is super good. Also, the move 3, attack 3 on the top is just allowing you to make sure that you get into position. Just having a move on the top is very, very strong. And when you're trying to move through a dungeon extremely quickly, you could just, you know, basically move 6 plus an extra 3, you know, move 9 in a single turn. That's incredibly strong. So Duelist Advance is definitely the card that we want to take here, and the bottom of this is going to combo really well with Throwing Knives right out of the gate as well, hopefully for us. Okay, so the card that we're going to swap out for Duelist Advance here is pretty simple. We are just going to straight like for like upgrade Quick Hands here. I'm going to go for Duelist Advance. If you wanted to keep your looting going, I could absolutely see you keeping Quick Hands in here if you wanted to, and potentially you could drop out something like Thief Snack if loot was more important to you than experience points and a bit of damage. However, I really think that this is just it's a strict upgrade over this card, so it's a pretty simple swap. The initiative as well, 16, is very, very nice. With this character, we definitely want to go either early or late. As you notice now, we actually only have one late card at the moment, which hopefully we will resolve soon. So you do have to be wary that your initiative will often put you in certain positions that can be a bit scary. So bear that in mind, and absolutely if you wanted to, I could see you keeping Quick Hands in just for that loot one and maybe getting rid of Thief Snack instead if you wanted to. But we're going for damage here. We're trying to do sort of the most efficient build that we possibly can. So that's our swap. Okay, so on to level 4. So level 4, we get access to Flurry of Blades, which is an attack 2, range 3, target 3, and we get move 4, gain advantage on all of our attacks this round. So this card is excellent. We really, really like this card. This attack 2, range 3, target 3 is just a strict upgrade for us over Throwing Knives. So it's an extra target, and also this gain advantage on all of our attacks this round can be extremely strong with some of our big attacks, because we definitely don't want to be missing them, right? So being able to do flanking strike and ensure that we actually get to land our attack by not drawing our miss is very, very strong. So Flurry of Blades is an excellent card. I really, really like it. Also, the top of it combos very well with the bottom of Duelist Advance that we've just picked up, right? So actually this has a very, very simple combo with the bottom of this in certain situations too. So Flurry of Blades is an excellent card. So the next card that we have is Gruesome Advantage. Now this card is interesting because it is basically just a supercharged backstab. So our backstab does +2 attack and +2 if they are adjacent, or if they are adjacent to some of our allies, and then +2 if they're adjacent to none of their allies, right? And it's a move 6 and this is a move 7. Now the initiative is very different though. So initiative is 62 versus 6, and it is just a straight kind of upgrade really to the backstab effect. Now, in my opinion, I don't think that this upgrade is really worth the price of admission, really. It's kind of a minor upgrade to this effect. You know, it's basically an extra 2 damage from the top, which isn't huge, and it's an extra +1 move on the bottom, which again isn't huge. You will actually often find yourself on the Scoundrel. Actually, you know, 6 is more than enough movement. You'll often find you'll only need to move 4 or 5. You know, moving 7, it's very rare that you're going to find yourself in a situation when you're going to have needed exactly 7 movement, right? It's kind of a rare situation to be in. I think the 6 movement is more than enough, and if you are moving through the dungeon at a sensible rate, and unless you get completely left behind by your allies, I don't think that you're really going to benefit from having the extra movement. So this is a pretty simple decision, and I can see that a lot of people would probably really gravitate towards this card because it's like, oh wow, it's like a supercharged version of backstab. Seems really, really good. But actually, Flurry of Blades is just a really strong role player in this build, and it will allow us to gain advantage, which is just going to allow us to keep doing damage and allow us to make sure that we maximize our damage. And the top has a very simple, decent combo. 3 initiative as well is pretty much as early as it comes, so we're very happy to see that. So it's pretty simple swap here with Flurry of Blades. We're going to be looking to swap out Throwing Knives here. It's a like-for-like swap. We do lose the loot 2 here to this, so bear that in mind, that if you are trying to loot, we are now have no loot cards. So this is not a heavy on the loot Scoundrel build, which I know some people will find strange because the Scoundrel is always looting, right? So be aware that this is not a loot heavy build, and so taking the throwing knives out, you are losing that loot too. Now I do think that probably by the time you get yourself to level 4, you're probably quite rich. You've probably got yourself some decent items anyway, so getting loads and loads of extra loot, unless perhaps you're playing the tabletop campaign and it may be your life goal to get a lot of money, you would, you know, not necessarily miss out so much. When you're playing with shared gold in Guildmaster mode as well, that actually gives you a really good you know, it actually allows you to just have one character maybe that's very good at looting, and you can actually kind of sack the looting off for some of the other characters. So if you had a support character, they could actually be, you know, healing, running around and looting, while your other main characters are dealing the damage, right? So with shared gold, you don't necessarily have this kind of this worry about getting the loot. You can just really concentrate on doing damage, and, you know, you can make sure that you maximize the loot by playing your other characters as well, especially in a solo situation where you're controlling all of the characters. If you're playing co-op, then, and you're playing individual gold like you're playing the campaign, or eventually in Guildmaster mode there will be individual gold as well available for co-op, and in that instance you may need to think about, okay, actually maybe I do want more loot because I want to buy an item for myself. So again, you know, you just have to bear that in mind. I can absolutely see you dropping special mixture here instead. I do like the move 3 and poison. I think it is just giving us an extra point of damage. I think the heal 3 has some corner case use, you know, but this is probably the weakest card at the moment in our deck. However, we can't play, you know, an attack on every card, and I like the fact that this gives us a little bit of setup. Get a bit of poison going, gets us some setup. So yeah, absolutely, I can see you swapping out special mixture instead, but we're going to be just upgrading throwing knives to flurry of blades here. Okay, on to level 5. So level 5, we have Cull the Weak, which is attack 4, add +2 attack, and gain 1 when the target is adjacent to any of our allies. This is basically just a slightly better flanking strike on the top with an attack 4 rather than an attack 3. Also, flanking strike, you know, could be upgraded to be as good as this with a +1 potentially. So the top of this card is pretty underwhelming really, considering that the level that we are now. We're level 5, you know, we're halfway to max level, and this is only a very marginal increase. Similar to Gruesome Advantage, it's a very small incremental increase on an effect we already have. Now the bottom of this is fairly decent. Again though, we're talking about burn effects. So on our next 6 attacks, targeting enemies with disarm, immobilize, or stun, add +2 attack. Now, as a scoundrel, you don't actually have access to too many of these right now. You will get access to some of these effects later on. But I don't think that this is something that, if I was leveling and this was like I was only just got to level 5, I don't think that this has, you know, an immediate benefit to my team. It really doesn't, unless perhaps you're playing with the music note, could potentially combo quite well with this card. Yeah, potentially the Mind Thief, actually, not terrible, you know, with things like hostile takeover early, can actually immobilize enemies and things like that. However, I just don't think that this is something that you really want to be leaning on too much. Again, it's a burn effect. It's something that you have to set up. So you have to kind of spend a turn setting up doing, rather than maybe concentrating on going after enemies. So it's quite rare, unless you started your turn next to an enemy that was disarmed or stunned, and then burn this and then do an attack, that you can immediately get the benefit for it. So again, I just think that this is a bit all in. When you've only got 9 cards in your hand, I don't think you want to be burning a card like this and then trying to play into this strategy for the rest of the scenario. Well, it's good that we don't really have to make a tough decision, really, because Visage of the Inevitable is just awesome. So having that top effect of this card is just excellent. Having an execute ability. Execute abilities are, you know, the strongest abilities in the game, really. In terms of attacks, being able to just kill an enemy completely outright is amazing. This is actually very easy for us to set up as well, using something like Smoke Bomb, and in fact, quite often I will find myself on turn 1 of the game playing Smoke Bomb and Visage of the Inevitable and setting up my characters into a favorable starting position to be able to just immediately pull an enemy and kill one on turn 1. It's just very, very strong effects to be able to do. So this is excellent, really, really strong. And the bottom is amazing as well if you put this into a decent situation. Now the move 2 is, you know, obviously a bit underwhelming. It's quite a small move. However, you know, you've probably got a good chance chance to poison, you know, several enemies here. You are a melee character, so you are going to be in the mix quite often. So I think that you're going to be able to poison a few things, and if not, it's always going to be poisoning one thing most likely for you, right? You're either using it for a very strong top, or you're getting some good use out of the bottom against elites. So even though the top does absolutely nothing against elites, the bottom can help you get a poison on that elite, which is actually very, very useful. So I think this is a very simple choice here. Vision of the Inevitable is just excellent. Very easy for us to set up as well. Again, you can use the Bottom of Sinister Opportunity with this, go very, very late and actually move and then potentially execute using Visage as well. So good opportunities for us now. And it makes sense for us to now drop the special mixture if we didn't drop it last time, because this move 3 poison effect, it's only a move 2 poison effect, but it's very similar, and the heal 3 has not been something we've been really using much of anyway. So very simple swap here. Special mixture out, Visage of the Inevitable in. Okay, on to level 6. Okay, so level 6 we get Crippling Poison and Burning Oil are our 2 choices. So Crippling Poison. Now, Crippling Poison says we get to add +2 attack to all of our attacks targeting enemies with poison. Seems very good, especially considering that we've just taken a card that will allow us to poison all adjacent enemies, right? The bottom is also attack 2, poison, and immobilize. So the bottom will actually allow us to do some poisoning as well. And it's a little bottom attack, which is a nice thing to see. Now, the problem that I have with this card is, again, it's a burn card. So we're burning something to hopefully get some benefit later on down the line. It doesn't immediately kill an enemy for a burn. It basically, you're saying, I'm willing to burn a card now to hopefully do, let's say, an extra, 6 or 8 damage potentially, let's say, over the course of a scenario. Burn effects need to be have a big effect on the game. They need to, in my opinion, save your skin, with like a big stun or big disarm or something like that will allow you to almost skip a go, be able to stop the enemy from even acting in a turn. Those are big burn effects. They need to do big attacks. This is essentially like a setup card that's then going to ask you to then, play in a certain way for the rest of the scenario, in which case you're going to be constantly wanting to do this, right? I just don't think that you really, with only a hand size of 9, you really want to invest a card in this. You'll see that this build is very anti-burn. There's only one card here that we really there's only 2 cards that we really burn, which is Smoke Bomb, which we try and burn late anyway, because we are using the pull, really. That's generally why we're using this card. And Backstab, which is a card that we're really using only for the movement. So again, it's another card we're only burning late, and we're only burning it when we get that sort of perfect opportunity to do so. So I don't like having a card like this where it's not clear whether or not you can kind of keep the card going throughout the entirety of the scenario, because the bottom effect will allow you to add that poison, but the top effect is encouraging you to burn this pretty early in order for you to get the maximum amount of value out of it. So I think this card kind of like puts you in a weird conundrum where it's like, do I burn the top of this card early in the scenario and then I play around like Visage of the Inevitable and maybe even bring in Venom Shiv, or do I then bring Special Mixture back and in an attempt to really maximize the +2 on this? Or do I keep it, in hand for a while and I actually take advantage of the attack 2 poison bottom and then burn this on a later time? It kind of like, it's a little bit of a weird card. It kind of puts you in an awkward position, and it doesn't really give you an outright strategy to shoot for. I think it just dilutes what you're trying to do with this character, which is essentially trying to do all of the adjacency stuff. As well as bearing in mind that this +2 attack doesn't actually get you an XP, right? You get an extra +2 attack, but it doesn't get you any experience points. The top of this does not get you any experience points. So, is it better to be, leaning on Crippling Poison, or is it better to be making sure that we're hitting our flanking strike, hitting our open wounds? I think that these things are just easier to do, get us an XP, and they're not a burn, so. Burning Oil is an excellent card. It gets us, we get a loot 2 back, which is going to be exciting for some, but also the late initiative on this card is actually something we've been looking for, because we have we're now starting to stack up a few late initiatives. We've got 93, we've got 88, and now we're going to have 95, which is going to be great because we're going to start having, half of our cards being early, half of our cards being late. And the top of this card is actually, really, really solid. Attack 4, range 3, and wound. The creating the fire effect is, maybe will help our allies, but it's certainly not really helping us, unless maybe we can pick up a certain one-handed item that might be able to help us out. But the extra XP, the range that it gives this character, I think is just super useful. And Wound is a very underrated effect. Wound can be very, very strong. So I think Burning Oil on balance is just like, I mean, these two cards aren't anything, you know, crazy exciting to write home about, but Burning Oil is definitely a card that we're happy to see. We're happy to get back to doing some looting, maybe, if you've been missing it. So Burning Oil, yeah, great card to pick up. Okay, so the card we're going to be getting rid of is actually going to be Thief Snack now. So Thief Snack has done some good work for us. Hopefully got us some extra XP to get us to this point with that disarm on the top. And the attack 3 bottom has been nice. However, now we are sort of leveling up. We're now at level 6. The enemies are starting to be a little bit tougher. Attack 3 is probably not really cutting it as much anymore. So I think we're in a safe position to be able to drop this. And like I said, really, we've been probably trying to use the traps to our advantage rather than disarming them. So, and again, this might be a sideboard card that comes in. You've got to stay flexible with the Scoundrel. You've got to be thinking about these things. It's definitely a good character for people who like to have lots of different options at their disposal. Certainly, I think you can actually, for each scenario, you can tailor yourself in different ways for the Scoundrel for sure. But I think it's just like a general thing. We can get rid of this. We can bring in the Burning Oil. We've got an XP on the top and an XP on the bottom of this card too, and neither of them are burns, so this is going to put us in a really nice sort of position to be able to continue to earn XP as well. We're missing out on 1 XP maybe, but it's certainly easier for us to do an attack than it is for us to disarm a trap. So we're happy to see Burning Oil, and we'll swap it in here. Okay, on to level 7. So level 7 here we have Stick to the Shadows, which is an attack 4. Use the nighttime element to add +4 attack and gain 2 experience points when the target is adjacent to any of our allies. So this is like kind of like a souped up Sinister Opportunity in many ways. We don't get like the extra, like Sinister Opportunity can stack more. So, you know, if we were to use the Knight here and we actually had several of our allies next to there's a bit more, you know, opportunity for stacking. So if you were playing with 4 characters with summons, you know, there is a possibility that Sinister Opportunity could actually attack for more, but it's probably pretty unlikely. Just being able to get the extra +4, like to attack for 8 and get 2 XP, that's like a really strong effect. Also on the bottom here, we have a move to invisible, which is just excellent. So again, something that we really struggle with the Scoundrel is potentially ending up in the firing line. Being able to turn invisible is just super useful for us, and also we can start to enhance these invisibles potentially with strengthen effects too, which is very, very nice. So this is a very good role-playing effect for us. Will keep us out of trouble, allow us to affect the level in different ways, so and control the level in different ways. So this is a great effect. This again, we're going to struggle to maybe reliably use this, especially with the starting setup. However, if you've now got maybe some other things, some other characters unlocked potentially, you can obviously start to generate this maybe a little bit easier in Guildmaster mode. In tabletop, you might struggle a little bit. You can always enhance some of your bottom moves actually with the nighttime element when you've unlocked the enchantments. So that could be the enhancement, sorry. So once you've done that, that can actually be an easier way of generating this for you as well. And the other card we've got is Spring the Trap. Spring the Trap is disarm 1 adjacent trap, target 1 enemy within range 3 to suffer the effects of the disarmed trap for 3. So this is like a supercharged Thief Snack. So not only are we disarming the trap, we're actually throwing it at an enemy within range 3, and they're actually going to take the effects, which can be very decent. And this card definitely leads to some combo potential with, you know, some of the not so good cards like Dig Pit for the Cragheart, for example. You could throw that trap at an enemy, which could be interesting. Also, the Tinkerer has some traps that they can place. So there are some decent opportunities for you to actually be able to do that. But it suffers the effects of the disarm trap. It's kind of a little bit this card is kind of it's just fine. Like I don't like this effect potentially because you know, you're very situational, right? You're hoping that there's going to be a trap near to you that's going to do something that's going to be good. You have to go all in to really make this happen. But certainly this can be a very fun card to play, but it's not you know, it's not going to be as good as perhaps, you know, you're going to get that one time that's going to be great. And then, you know, you're also going to get loads of times where it's not going to be great. So the bottom of this is on our next attack, targeting an enemy adjacent to none of its allies and also adjacent to any of our allies, we double the value of the attack and gain 2. So kind of similar to sort of like Smoke Bomb with the doubling effect. However, it is just a you play this and essentially just the next time that this can trigger, this will trigger essentially. So it's not on our next attack, it will be on our next attack the target. So you can play this and then potentially, you know, maybe the situation for this doesn't arise for a little while, and then later on in the scenario it does, this will trigger. And you can do that. So this leads to a couple of problems really. One, this triggering at a time when you don't want it to trigger, and two, you again having to play something to hopefully get a payoff maybe later on down the line. I mean, you can obviously play this and then immediately play an attack and maybe trigger it straight away. But I just don't like this effect. I think it's a bit too much. It's a bit too all in. You're hoping to do one big attack. If you don't have Strengthen and you draw your miss, this is a huge blowout. Imagine playing this, using the top of Backstab and thinking that you're going to kill a boss or something in one go. Going to do some crazy attack. You don't have Strengthen and you draw your miss, you know? So this can lead to huge blowouts potentially, which I'm never a fan of. So yeah, Spring the Trap unfortunately just doesn't do enough, I think, and Stick to the Shadows is something that we're very happy to see, I think, here. So we'll be taking that. Okay, so the cards we're going to be swapping out here. Now this could differ for you personally, because I think we're now reaching a point with the Scoundrel where you may want to, you know, choose some different things depending on what your play style is and how you've been finding certain cards. So, I mean, the obvious thing to do here would be to swap out Sinister Opportunity, because this effect on the top is just a better version, really, of the top of Sinister Opportunity. The bottom move to Invisible is very, very strong, you know, but we will be losing this move 3 and being able to move an enemy, which has actually been a very good way that we can ensure that we get all of our adjacency bonuses potentially. And depending on how you've been playing and perhaps your positioning, perhaps you've been leaning on the bottom of this card quite a lot in order to ensure that you get these bonuses. So you may actually want to keep Sinister Opportunity around just because of this move 3 and the move 1 on the bottom. I think the bottom effect a lot of new players are going to gravitate towards, because it just helps you ensure that you play this class well. Now, if let's say you've got yourself to a very good position and you're feeling like, yeah, I'm a lean, mean Scoundrel machine, I know what I'm doing, I don't necessarily need to lean on this anymore, then absolutely you could swap this in. But if you did want to keep this in, then I think removing Backstab here is actually an absolutely fine thing to do, because Backstab essentially is going to give you 7, there you go, quick maths. It's going to give you a potential of 7 damage here with the top and a burn if you can, you know, make the stars align. You have the move 6 on the bottom, which is obviously something we've been using and we've been leaning on quite a bit. However, you know, we've now got some other decent moves on some of our other cards. We have still got a move 5 with Flanking Strike. You know, we've got a move 5 with Open Wound. We've got a move 4 with Gaining Advantage. So depending on how you're finding your movement, you may be okay with losing the move 6. And Stick to the Shadows can do an attack of 8, and it's not a burn if we set it up in the correct way. So I think that although, you know, Backstab now actually it's easier to set up, we don't have to worry about the element. However, it's not maybe quite as good as going like, we could just go Smoke Bomb and then Stick to the Shadows the following turn, and we actually get more damage potentially than Backstab, right? So, and also Backstab, it actually could be harder to set up in the sense that making sure that you also have the, you know, for them to be alone and adjacent to one of your people is actually not the easiest thing in the world to set up every time. So you might actually find that Stick to the Shadows is easier to set up for you. So I could see you swapping out either of the two. Personally, I think I probably am going to swap out Backstab here for Stick to the Shadows, because I think that this attack is just you know, not as good as this attack really that we're setting up, and the move to Invisible is just really, really strong. We may move out on the move 6, so absolutely here this is a fair point for you at this point in time to actually swap out Sinister Opportunity if you want to. However, I'm going to go down the route of let's just make things easy for us. Let's make sure that we are always getting our adjacency bonuses. So we'll actually keep Sinister Opportunity in for that reason. Okay, moving to level 8. So level 8 we have Stiletto Storm here, attack 2, range 3, target 4. So this is like the super throwing knives. It's like a double throwing knives. It's going to allow you to attack 4 targets instead of 2. Very, very strong. An extra target from Flurry of Blades as well. And also we've got a move 4, retaliate 1 self on the bottom here. Now, this card is kind of a little bit underwhelming, really, because, again, the attack here hasn't increased. We've got another target, which is nice. We could have up to 4 targets now. If you're playing with 2 mercenaries, you might actually find that you don't often have 4 targets to actually target with Stiletto Storm if you were to take it, because, I mean, with only 2 mercenaries, you have less enemies on the board, so I mean, the usefulness of this is definitely going to go down. This is definitely going to have more use in a larger party for sure. And the move 4, retaliate 1, I mean, we don't want to be taking damage on the Scoundrel. We don't have a great health pool. We certainly want to be going in. We want to be killing enemies. We want to be doing a lot of damage, and we want to be running away and hiding. We want to be doing back-to-back turns to ensure that we don't get hit. So the retaliate is just not something we really want. I mean, the move 4 is, I guess okay. I mean, it's not terrible, but we already have some pretty decent movement. We're not really struggling for movement there. So this card in general is a little bit underwhelming. Now, there is a ranged Scoundrel build, which takes a lot of different cards. I won't really be going into the ranged build, but if you ever want to ask me about that, catch me on stream, because I have run it on stream for a few a few dungeons before, and I do think that the ranged build of this character is it's a bit of silly fun and can be interesting. However, it's certainly not the best build on this character, and going for the damage and stuff is certainly what we want to be doing. So just kind of underwhelming, really. We've already got a card that does target 3, which is probably going to get most of the things that we want anyway, and the bottom just isn't very good, and the bottom of this is arguably actually much better. In fact, it definitely is much better. Now we have Pain's End. Now, Pain's End is a card where you can completely ignore the top of. We hope that we never have to use the top of Pain's End. Now, maybe at the end of a scenario, you find yourself pretty beaten up, and actually you may need to use it. But realistically, we can ignore the top of Pain's End, because what we're really looking at is the bottom of this, which is move 3, kill 1 adjacent enemy whose current hit point value is equal to or less than 3. And the key thing here is just kill 1 adjacent enemy. It doesn't care if it's a normal enemy, doesn't care if it's an elite enemy, doesn't care if it's a boss. You can just use this, and this can just immediately kill something, which is just super good, especially against low health, high shield enemies, where maybe you only have to do a little bit of damage, maybe you can wound them so they can get a little bit low, and then you can just go in and use Pain's End to finish them off. So this is actually very good. You may think, well, hang on, an enemy who's at health value 3, surely we just need to attack them anyway, right? Just having any kind of instant kill effect is very valuable in Gloomhaven. So this is just a very strong effect. Very good at killing things like living spirits. Yeah, we love this card. So we're definitely taking Pain's End here. Stiletto Storm in the ranged build can be, interesting. However, it's just really not what we're looking for in this build. Pain's End is just excellent. So we're taking Pain's End. Okay, so the card we're going to be taking out for Pain's End here is probably going to be Sinister Opportunity at this point in time. Now that we have got another move 3 here that does something better, arguably, we also have Stick to the Shadows, which is going to be using that night element. So we're very rarely going to be using the top of this for this. We're literally only using this now for the bottom, really, in this setup. Then we will be swapping this out for Pain's End. The bottom is much better. Hopefully at this point you have managed to get very good with playing the Scoundrel, and you can recognize the patterns involved with the monster movement and being able to set yourselves up without relying as much on this. Like I said, you could have dropped this a little bit earlier, and in which case, if you have, I think you would probably be looking to maybe get rid of something different here. You might be looking to get rid of flanking strike even. Possibly you might even get rid of flanking strike. You may consider even getting rid of open wound potentially. So there are definitely some different splinter points in this build where you can actually make some decisions based on your party makeup, the situation, and the success that you've had. There's definitely some things that you can do. However, I think that Pain's End, this effect on the bottom is super strong, and hopefully at this point in time, we're actually well versed in playing the Scoundrel. I mean, we're now nearly max level, so we should be pretty good at playing the Scoundrel, and let's hope that we don't need this move 1 to make us good. Also, potentially we have some items that can help us out in different ways as well. So So we'll have lots of gold, we'll have items, so we don't need to lean so much on smaller effects in the game. So yeah, so this is an easy decision, I think. If you haven't already got a Sinister Opportunity, then you'd obviously get rid of the other card here that you had instead. Okay, so at level 9, we get the fanfare, which is for the card Long Con. So Long Con is a very, very good card, considered by many to be, you know, one of the best cards, if not the best card in the game, full stop. The initiative 2 on this card is just insane. That is the earliest you can possibly go over, other than 1, but yeah, I mean, this is going to guarantee that you are going before the enemies every single time. The attack 4, target all adjacent enemies and disarm is just super strong. This card did not necessarily need to have disarm put on it. I mean, disarm is definitely what makes it broken. So being able to go into a group of enemies, perhaps you want to combo this with, you know, Visage of the Inevitable. Perhaps you go in, poison everybody, then you're going to attack 4 and disarm everything. You know, then they just miss a go. Then on the next turn, you can do even more damage. It's just an insane effect. And although the bottom of this card is very situationally, might have some use, you are very rarely playing it. You are looking to use the top of Long Con wherever possible, setting up good opportunities to do so. It's just an incredibly strong card. The card that we have opposite it is Watch It Burn, which actually is a card that I quite like, and if you're playing the ranged build, this is actually the card that you would go for. So being able to add poison and wound to all of your attacks combos very well with crippling poison, right? This was a card that we had earlier. So this would actually require you to burn 2 cards though, which is a very risky business. Make sure you got a lot of stamina potions if you're going to go for this ranged build, because you're going to be burning Watch It Burn to add poison and wound to all of your attacks. Then you're going to be burning crippling poison to give yourself an extra 2 attack to all of those targets, because they're going to be poisoned. So yeah, the move 5 wound target all adjacent enemies is actually also incredibly strong. Very good effect. It's just a lot slower than Long Con. Long Con has an immediate effect. Being able to move in, attack 4, do a lot of damage, and then disarm a lot of enemies is just basically, you know, going to skip a turn for many enemies, buying you a whole other round. Whereas, you know, Watch It Burn is great, you're going to move in and wounds. However, if those enemies have got 15 health, are you going to be able to wait 15 rounds? No, you're not going to be able to wait 15 rounds for them all to die naturally of their wounds, right? So, although wound is a good effect, I really like it, and I think it can definitely add up over the course of a scenario. There's no way that you're not taking Long Con in this build. So the only build that really wants to go for Watch It Burn is the range build, which again, I encourage you to, you know, come into stream and ask me about if you're interested in it, but it's certainly not a build that I would advise any new players to play. And it's also a terrible leveling build for the tabletop version. The only way you can really play this build is if you you know, if you're willing to just go to level 9 and get all of the cards, really. So once you get to level 9 in Guildmaster mode, you can reset your mercenary and try this build, try the ranged build out. So it's something that you can do, you know, for a bit of fun, but it's certainly not something that I would advise for people trying to level, and it's certainly not a build that I would advise for new players to try who are, you know, just trying to start out in the game. But something maybe you can mess around with when you've got some experience under your belt and you're playing Guildmaster mode. So we take Long Con here. The card we're going to swap out for Long Con is we're actually going to swap out Flanking Strike here. I think a Long Con is just slightly better. There is a little bit, we are going to be losing quite a bit of movement by doing this. So we are kind of losing a decent move 5. That is definitely a consideration. We are sort of slowing down with our movement, but I think getting rid of Flanking Strike, or arguably you could make an argument for getting rid of Smoke Bomb here potentially, but that does mean that then Stick to the Shadows is not as good. But I would seriously consider getting rid of Flanking Strike. I could also see an argument for maybe getting rid of Open Wound instead, potentially, and keeping Flanking Strike because you want the earlier initiative and you want to just have the extra damage. I could possibly see an argument for that, but for me, I think you're absolutely fine to drop Flanking Strike here if you want to use Long Con instead. However, you know, at this point in time, this may be the opportunity where you want to swap from having those winged shoes to actually going back to a standard pair of boots. So that whereas you might want boots of striding to be able to give yourself that +2 movement, or you know, an upgraded pair of boots that you've unlocked if you're later on in the game. So that might be a consideration that you may actually need to consider to do that, especially to play to something like Visage of the Inevitable now becomes very, very good if you can add extra movement to it, right? So there are some definitely some considerations where you might want to use some of that loot that you've managed to gather throughout your with your burning oil and throughout your leveling. You may actually now want to sell those wing shoes and think about going onto standard boots. But yeah. Once we get to max level here, we are very, very good at dealing with enemies, going invisible in key spots, pulling them into traps, getting our adjacency bonus, and just basically spamming long con as much as possible to do as much damage as possible. Okay, for you tabletop players, I will now put a graphic up on the screen of all of the cards from the tabletop version for you to take a look, and you can always pause here if you'd like to see what we've got. I'll reiterate again that I think the Scoundrel is a very versatile character. I think you have to be flexible with your builds with the Scoundrel. I think this build gives you that. It gives you some flexibility to be able to chop and change things. So you may find that actually a particular scenario is longer than another one, so maybe you do need to start bringing in your movement cards again. You might need to bring Flanking Strike back into the fold. You might need to bring Backstab back into the fold, just because you're finding that your movement is difficult. Now in Guildmaster mode, I think that this will probably do you pretty well for most of the scenarios. In the campaign, I think it's a bit different. The scenarios are designed in slightly different ways, so you may find that actually, you know, they are designed, you know, certain numbers of movements to get to certain hexes and things like that they are actually designed in. But with the random dungeon generation that you have in Gloomhaven Digital, I think you can get away with having less movement. Also, you're going to get money a lot quicker. You're going to be able to have lots of money to be able to buy items to help, you know, you move around anyway, so it's not so much of a big deal. So certainly bear that in mind, that this build is more focused around digital, and you're going to have to be flexible with this build if you're playing in tabletop, because you may actually have to drop in some extra things. So like I said at the beginning of the build, the Scoundrel, in my opinion, has quite a high floor, but it also has a very high ceiling. So, you know, most people who are playing it, a new player can come in and play the Scoundrel fairly proficiently from level 1 all the way up to level 9, and you'll have a good time doing it. However, to play this class to a really, really high level, you do have to think turns in advance, where enemies are going to be, where you're going to be, how you're going to position around those enemies, you know, generating, you know, an element. Is it the turn to go invisible with Smoke Bomb or not? You need to start thinking about these things. So it's actually a great class for a new player to begin with, because you kind of start learning, and you know, right from the get-go, you can kind of get a few things going, some basic combos going, right? Which makes them quite an enjoyable class to play when you're first learning. And then you know, you're getting lots of loot as well, because obviously you want to get loot and you want to get items. So it's a very good class for that. And as you kind of go up the levels, your experience will grow as you get used to playing the character. You learn the game better. You know, you get more experience playing the game just in general, and then that will actually, you know, translate, because you're going to be, you know, picking up some more complicated cards to use, but still extremely strong, and you're still playing in the same kind of fashion. So I actually recommend the Scoundrel as a starting character. I think it's a very good starting character along with the Brute to play, because, you know, you can't really do anything too wrong except for, you know, perhaps ending your turn constantly in focus with the enemies, you know, burning a lot of cards early, perhaps with backstab, single out, things like that. I mean, that's a bit of a trap you need to avoid, but it is not difficult to play this character to a fairly good level right from the get-go. Okay, so let's take a look at perks. So the Scoundrel actually has a really good attack modifier deck and a very small attack modifier deck, which is definitely what we want. We want to be doing lots of damage. We want to be able to draw our plus modifiers with our small ranged attacks and things like that, so to try and get some extra damage in. We have ways to get advantage as we're going up, so we do need to bear this in mind. So advantage and rolling modifiers can definitely be something that can catch you out with this character, because you have a thin deck. You know, having advantage and rolling modifiers can sometimes lead to you drawing that miss and having to accept that miss. So that is definitely a risk with this character. So bear that in mind. And in fact, you know, some players may want to try and avoid taking any of these just because of that reason. So that is something to think about, that if you are going for the advantage route, bear in mind this can come back to hurt you. So fairly simply, the first few ones we're going to take is we're going to take consistency. With a few exceptions, this is generally the one that every single character will take if they have it when they start leveling. The only exceptions really being if you have an ignore negative scenario effects, passive attribute talent. That's probably what you're going to be taking early on if you're planning on doing some tanking and getting some armor items. But generally speaking, this is the one that every single class will take in their first 2 levels if they have it. Next, we're going to be removing our -2. Very, very strong. The reason why we do this first is obviously it's 2 -1s, so that's getting rid of, you know, essentially 2 cards, where this is only getting rid of 1. And to be honest, you can kind of treat the -2 almost like a miss in the early parts of the game. You know, almost kind of like a miss. It's not quite as bad as a miss. If you're playing on normal difficulty, you're still going to do damage, but on insane levels of difficulty and higher levels of difficulty, the -2 is almost the same as a miss many times. So getting rid of the -1s is much better. So we'll do that, then we'll get this, then again we can get rid of our last -1 here with focus. So now the only way that we don't do the damage that we have listed on our card is if we draw this, right? Which is super important information and definitely something that you should be thinking about, right? Is you're thinking that I know that I'm always going to be drawing the number on my card, you know, potentially, you know, +1 or +2, but that's the number that I'm going to be drawing unless I miss. So that's kind of quite an important thing to think about. Then we can go over to heighten, when we can remove these. Again, we're just pushing this in a positive direction here, replacing this +0 with a +2. Again, just making it so that we're going to be more likely now to do extra damage, right? So now is actually more likely to draw a +1, a +2, or a ×2, you know, than this. This is a bad draw, you know. When you first started out, this was like, yeah, great, I did this damage, right? This is bad draw now. These are the draws you're aiming for, right? So this is when we get into a bit of a position where you know, do we think about rolling modifiers or not? Now in this situation, I think it's absolutely fine to take dust. You could have actually taken dust maybe a little bit earlier, but actually I think getting yourself, you know, you could potentially have used dust before heighten. I think that's absolutely fine. I don't really, you know, you can go either way with these. It might actually be easier for you to go dust actually before you do heighten, thinking about it, because then you're not, you know, you're then more likely to draw your +1, +2. But again, your deck would be very, very thin, so you know you may have a situation where you draw this a little bit more regularly. So you know, it depends, because thinning your deck is good in many ways because you're going to be drawing, you know, the better cards, but it's bad in other ways because if you're doing multi-target attacks or you know, if you thin your deck out, you're actually going to be drawing your miss fairly regularly. So it depends on how much you use the strengthen effect, depends on how much you use the advantage effect, I guess. So, but we'll be using dust here, but absolutely I could see you swapping these two out depending on how often you really want to miss. But I would advise you to. I prefer to do it this way than this way, but absolutely I could see people going the other way with that. So now we are in that position where, you know, would we consider doing rolling modifiers? Now, I would be very tempted to suggest that you don't take any rolling modifiers on this character. Bit strange, but I think the fact that you have, you know, a very strong possibility, especially with advantage, which we do have advantage. You know, we took a Flurry of Blades, which gets us that advantage. You know, there is a possibility here that we rolling modifier into this. However, if we have advantage, we know we're pretty much always going to be doing at least this, right? I mean, because we could draw this and this when we had advantage, right? That would be a bad draw, very unlucky draw, but we know that's a possibility. With rolling modifiers, if you were to take any rolling modifiers, I would advise you probably to take the +1s, maybe take the +3s. However, again, this is, you know, adding two. It's completely up to you and your experience. You know, some people will have, you know, maybe you shouldn't let one negative experience with rolling modifiers really kind of color your opinion of them. But I certainly think that rolling modifiers, you know, if I was to draw a +1 onto my, you know, +1 to do an extra 2, it's almost like I'm doing 2 damage. That's, you know, that's pretty decent, but it's not going to be, you know, the be all or end all. It's really down to personal preference. I can absolutely see a player here just, you know, not taking rolling modifiers with this character because you are so scared of drawing this, because you're, you know, especially if you consider that you're going to be, you know, doing long con at level 9, you're going to be attacking multiple things. If you have advantage on that, there's a fairly good chance that you will draw this. You know, you could be doing it against 4 enemies. You know, that's 4 draws with advantage. There's a good way that you could essentially draw this, right? There's a fairly high chance that you could draw this. Moving on to items for the Scoundrel, the kind of items that you are going to be looking for really is, say, wing shoes is a very good early item for you to get. Power potions are very good when you're trying to do these big attacks. However, I think stamina potions are very, very good. Stamina potions are especially good on characters who have small hand sizes because you're more likely to exhaust through various means. So having stamina potions is very, very important. So I definitely encourage you to use a stamina potion. And if I could only have one potion on this character, it would definitely be a stamina potion. Being able to maybe back-to-back flanking strikes or something like that could be very, very good and very, very strong. So yep, definitely stamina potions. Power potions, maybe a healing potion. You may also want you know, any of the kind of like small items here that you can get. Moon earrings, you know, very good for resetting boots. Star earrings, very good for getting items. I mean, these items are very good on any character. Ring of Skulls is actually a super like small kind of like, it's a niche item that you may find some use out of. I certainly wouldn't buy an item like this, but if you could get a Ring of Skulls, because essentially this would allow you to, so now if I was to have the Ring of Skulls, right, I can actually play this summon out in a hex adjacent to an enemy and then attack and immediately generate my my adjacency bonus. So this is kind of like a sneaky way that you can just on a single turn get adjacency with a summon. Right? Certainly do not buy this item because 50 gold is probably best spent on other things, but it's a little like kind of like niche little bit of tech there for you, and something that you can do certainly if you can get one of these small summon items or something like that, which will allow you to do that quickly. You may also consider getting a minor mana potion to help make that nighttime element to more reliably trigger sinister opportunity. Certainly just having one to maybe give yourself one nice little trigger of sinister opportunity is, you know, 10 gold well spent, I think. In terms of other items that you may want, Cloak of Invisibility is kind of a given with this character. You're going to often find yourself in positions when you're going to be the focus. You know, you're going to find yourself behind enemy lines quite often, and you're going to want to go invisible on doors. You know, your early initiative will allow you to open doors for your team, so you could quite often be the character who opens the door, which will mean that you can kind of run in, go invisible on the door. All of the enemies can't really take their turn, and then you can go late on everybody else, and they can then follow you into the room, setting you up really, really nicely. So this character is naturally a very good character with Cloak of Invisibility. Hand items, say Poison Dagger, very simple way for you to be able to get your poison achievement in Guildmaster mode. Also helps stack damage for you, so very good. Jagged Sword, in a similar kind of fashion, if you can get Jagged Sword, this will give you wound. I also quite like some of the elemental weapons for this character. So if you can get something, let's have a look and see. I'm sure I've got one here. Yeah. So if you can get like a frigid blade, I mean, there are ones for different elements in the game. If you can get these elemental blades, you actually can use and maybe make use of some of these elements that start kicking around from other characters. Although you're not generating them yourself, they are going to be very party composition dependent on whether or not they're going to be any good for you. Potentially even matchup dependent, because certain enemies make elements very regularly. So in Guildmaster mode, you have the freedom to spend as much money as you want and sort of like tailor your builds maybe a little bit more to the scenario. So this is something that you might want to think about with this character. For a head item, I mean, I do like Eagle-Eye Goggles, but the chances are that if you are playing a 3 or 4 person party, you are not going to be chosen to be the bearer of Eagle-Eye Goggles, unfortunately. They should really be on multiple target AoE based characters over, you know, yourself, who is a single target. So unfortunately, unless you're playing like a 2 mercenary group, chances are you ain't going to get access to Eagle-Eye Goggles. Someone else is gonna snatch those from you. So the other kind of items that you can consider things like Hawk Helms. Hawk Helms are not too bad for stuff like throwing daggers, being able to just increase the range of throwing daggers. Again, I wouldn't really buy this, but if you could just sort of like, get it through other means, then absolutely. It's not something that I would be rushing out to spend my gold on. You've also got things, you've got potential things like Protective Charm, which are interesting items to stop you from getting, taking a lot of damage, poison and wound. Empowering Talisman is very, very good for you because it will allow you to get your stamina potions back. Again, any kind of character who wants to spam certain cards over and over and over again wants to use stamina potions. Any way that we can recur those stamina potions is very, very strong. So Empowering Talisman, I think, is very good for doing that too. Also, you could get a Pendant of Dark Pacts, which is a way that you could essentially get yourself up to 2. Like if you had a major and a minor stamina potion, you could basically get both of those back. However, the curses can come back to hurt this character quite a lot compared to some of the other ones that naturally have a lot of advantage. You don't have so much advantage, and you have a small deck, so the chances are you will draw these curses. So if you're going to go and use Pendant of Dark Pacts, I suggest it be something that you get late and you have your multi-target ranged attacks. Make sure you have advantage, and then blast off some of those multi-target ranged attacks, and you've got a good chance of maybe getting rid of some of those curses in the process. But just be very wary that the Pendant of Dark Pacts may seem very good for you, but can actually come back and hurt you. So I think in an ideal situation, you're going to be wanting to try and get Empowering Talisman, really, because just getting back one major stamina potion is probably better than you getting back a major and a minor and then having that curse effect. I think it's probably better. Okay, let's talk about enhancements. So the Scoundrel doesn't really have any hugely important enhancements you can go for. There are some like sneaky good ones that you can do though. So on Smoke Bomb, you have the invisibility here. Adding the strengthen effect to any kind of invisible ability is very strong. Being able to go invisible, strengthen, then on your next turn, you're going to have advantage, right? So this kind of gets around you not having those eagle-eye goggles, because in an ideal situation, you would probably use eagle-eye goggles here to make sure that you get that advantage on your big Smoke Bomb attack, right? So this will just play into it. However, it's a lot of gold to invest on basically what is going to be a single attack. Bear that in mind. It is quite a lot of gold to invest, but I think it's a very strong thing to do, and certainly on Guildmaster where you have lots and lots of money to spend, I think this is an absolute fine investment. On some of the other cards, you're going to probably want to be adding jump to some of your big moves, so I can absolutely see you adding jump to something like Open Wound, or Flanking Strike, or Backstab is unfortunately... Backstab, I always feel like this card should be one you can enhance, but Backstab is one of the only ones you can't enhance the bottom of. So bear in mind, but certainly adding jump is going to be where you're going to be on a lot of these. Maybe adding extra move to stick to the shadows, but... Oh, sorry, you can't add an extra move to this. But this is definitely another one for the strengthen, potentially. This actually is probably better placed with the strengthen compared to Smoke Bomb, actually. Because Smoke Bomb is... how much is it? Smoke Bomb is 50. I mean, that's a big price difference though. It's an extra 150 gold. But if you got the money in Guildmaster mode, I think it certainly makes the character a lot stronger. So you're going to be looking mainly for movement, like adding extra moves. Adding an extra move on this could be a very good one. You don't really want to add jump to this. That's not really going to do anything. So it's going to be the extra move. Another thing you could consider doing is actually adding something like the dark element that you've been struggling to make. This could be like a fine enhancement to put on something like Open Wound. That will allow you to ensure that you get your Sinister Opportunity and later your Stick to the Shadows effects. That's absolutely fine. But in terms of enhancements, you can increase some of these attacks up by 1. Fairly simple, cheap enhancements. But this character does not really have any, slam dunk enhancements that I think absolutely make the character, much, much better, or ones that you should really rush out to get. Maybe the invisibility on Smoke Bomb being the only one, which I think is... Sorry, the strengthen on the invisible on Smoke Bomb being the only one that I really, really think is very, very strong. Potentially, you could increase the pull to maybe be an extra 1 here, fairly cheap, could be quite decent, or increase the range on Smoke Bomb too. Could actually also be another one. However, most of the time I found that this is suitable and that you don't actually struggle too much. But if you are struggling, again, this is another card. So Smoke Bomb, I think, would be the card that I would advise you to enhance the most, because again, it's the one that we're going to keep all the way up to level 9. And there we have it, guys. There's my build for the Scoundrel. I hope you enjoyed it. I think the Scoundrel is a character that's got lots of flexibility, and certainly there's less scope to go wrong potentially than other characters. So a very good new player friendly character that can do a lot of damage and you can have a lot of fun with. So I hope you found the information useful. As always, guys, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you did enjoy the content, or consider checking out any of my other videos below. I do plan on trying to do a guide for every single character in the game, which is a monumentous task, and I'm nearly done all of the starters, so I just have the Tinkerer left to go, and then we're going to be on to the unlockable classes, and I will try and get both the music note and the triangles one done first, so then we are kind of up to date with everything in Gloomhaven Digital. We do have a community Discord server that is filling up with players looking to play Gloomhaven Digital with others. There will be a link down in the description if you're interested in joining, and it's a great place to just ask Gloomhaven veterans what they think, get any rules questions, or of course if you want to ask me anything, that's a really good place to do so. And of course you can always catch me live over at twitch.tv/MandatoryQuest every Monday, Wednesday and Sunday, streaming Gloomhaven, so you can always check me out and ask me any questions you want there. But apart from that, guys, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next video. Bye. Well, it was fun, guys. It was a good scenario, I think. I think we can learn a bit more from this. I think we don't really need to play on this difficulty level, do we, really? What is this? They're only moving one. These guys aren't moving, so at least I can get an attack in before I run away. Oh, yeah. Looks pretty good to me.